How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. And guys, welcome to our 10-part video series on From Reaction to Reputation, a rookie's path to stability. Now, guys, if you get a chance, this is the book it's going to be modeling from, so you should get a chance to pick this up. And it's From Reaction to Reputation, a rookie correctional officer's guide to discretion, authority, and earning command presence. I think right now, our rookies need help. We are losing senior staff. So me and Russ have been working as much as we could to put material out there that helps manage that gap between inexperience and experience, between being reactionary and then ultimately having what we call established expectations. The book actually titles it Reactionary to Reputation, which is actually another way you could put it. And this is going to be we're going to do a lot of videos outside of these 10. We're going to cross into other books that we've written and just kind of keep the information going out there because it is needed for this profession. Because right now, as I said, without the senior role models, who's teaching these lessons? So real quick, Russ, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. My name's Russ Hamilton. I'm a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Got my start way back in 1989 at San Quentin State Prison. Eventually, I promoted and retired, and then I went to work as a senior juvenile correctional officer. Currently, I work for a company that does private company that does reentry and rehabilitation work for a private county probation department, not a private county probation department, a probation department that's run by the county and a local county jail. And I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos. That's Chaos with a K. And that's on Facebook. And we really focus on mentorship and, just good, solid correctional foundational knowledge for everyone that works in corrections, not just if you have a badge or not. And, I think it's something that's, really helped a lot of people come forward and really grow within their profession.
Yeah, now, guys, remember, guys, right now we're modeling these trainings off of some ebooks that we have on the market. Just to show you a few we have right now, we have Surviving Without a Mentor, 100 Deep Cuts for Rookie Correctional Staff, Ranked Before Ready, 100 Subtle Survival Tips for New Correctional Officer or Correctional Leaders, Warden's Wisdom, that's 100 Subtle Lessons in Prison Leadership. Then we have Corrections Interrupted, which is how to rebuild after a critical incident. And then we have what we're doing now, which is Reaction to Reputation. And then I have a new one out called Behind the Gates, Civilians Guide to Navigating Correctional Facilities. But today's focus, and for the next 9 videos after this, total of 10, will be about our rookies. Now, guys, the tagline for this, which is very important, is the rules may start the job, but discretion builds the career. And I think that's where there's a gap. And that's what the series of videos is going to try to help you with. The gap between inexperienced officer who is reactionary and an experienced officer who kind of got that reputation is usually through discretion. And that's something that we're going to explore a little bit more in the course of the 10 videos. Now, I'm going to read from the book. We're going to go chapter by chapter, but today is just going to be about the introduction. And in the process, there are questions that me and Russ are going to kind of talk about. We're going to relate it to the material, and we are going to really be vulnerable. And what I mean by that is we are going to bring in our personal experiences, because the key to the lessons here is that we want to show you that these lessons have been applied or we have learned them through experience. So the introduction, which is today's video, is the uniform is new, but the pressure is real. So again, my name is Anthony Gangi. I spent decades in the field of corrections, on the tiers, in the training room, in leadership meetings, and behind the mic of Tier Talk, where we speak openly about the real challenges of working behind the wall. I've trained rookies, coached supervisors, and written about inmate manipulation, facility leadership, and everything in between. But if there's one truth that keeps showing up, no matter the rank, no matter the facility, it's this: presence isn't automatic, it's earned. And that's what's going to get us to our first question, Russ. So again, presence isn't automatic, it's earned. This is a word that is pretty much, you should be very familiar with coming into corrections. Presence is a word that we kind of breathe every day into life. And the question that I'd like to start off first with you, Russ, is right here. What does presence mean to you? And how did you first realize that presence wasn't automatic?
So I think some of the key things that are worth recognizing is um, your presence as a correctional officer changes things, or at least it should change things with regards to the things, the actions, the behaviors, and so forth of the inmate population. Now that change and the way that you impact that behavior, is startlingly different. From one end of your career all the way into the other, or at least it should be. There should be a progression within that arc, and it should be something that you're learning and that you're trying, to bring to its fullest. There is a thing that just changes the inmate population that just has to do with only what you're wearing, which is your badge and your uniform. There is another thing, though, another point that's about your reputation. Reputation can only be gained over a long period of time where you have constant interaction with the inmate population, and they come to know and understand and actually be able to to try, if they're really good or if they're really lucky or if you're really dumb, to be able to get over on what your presence means. And so having said all that, this is something that you really have to work to cultivate, to feed, and to develop. And I think that there's so many times that I can point to when I just first started, inmates would react merely because I was there and I was either an unknown quantity or they knew that I was very new, which is very different from the way they react to me, after years in, and they know what my capabilities are. They probably knew better than me what some of my weaknesses were. And it's a different way that they start to try and interact with you once you reach a certain point. But that's assuming a certain level of ability and so forth.
Yes, and I want to say something, guys, with presence. So presence is intentional, like Russ said. I mean, you can't depend on the uniform to give you presence. I've seen people do that. I've seen new boots come in and they believe that they can hide behind the uniform. And I'm going to be honest with you in corrections. The uniform should mean a lot to you, 100%. You're now trusted to wear it. But don't think that the uniform means a lot to the inmate population. This is the world that they're in. So the initial impact of someone in uniform creating that presence just through the uniform, I don't think really exists amongst the inmate population because they are conditioned to have those frequent interactions with people in uniform. To be honest with you, I think the presence of our uniform may have more of an impact with our civilian staff to a certain point. But with that said, you can't hide behind the uniform. And like Russ mentioned, the show that we're going to do over the course of the 10 episodes, including today, we're going to dive in deep on how you grow that presence. And it is through time. It's through interaction. It's through consistency. It's through discretion. It's through trust. I mean, it's something that truly does speak for itself when you start doing what's expected of you in that role. And again, I do love this saying. I just want to say it one more time. Presence isn't automatic, it's earned. So when you're coming into this profession, you should remember that. Presence isn't automatic, it's earned. All right, so now let's get back to some of the reading. So you passed the academy, you've memorized the rules, you rehearsed your radio codes, practiced your stance, and probably double-checked your gear more times than you care to admit. But then it hits you. None of that truly prepares you for what happens when that first steel door slams shut behind you. You're alone in that housing unit. No instructors, no pause button, no script, just your instincts, your authority, your posture, and the badge that's pinned to your chest. Now, Russ, Can you remember that very first moment the door closed behind you and what changed in your mindset in that exact moment?
So, on the very first day where I was, actually carrying out duties. I mean, it was day one at the institution after 6 weeks in the academy, and we had this sergeant show up, BB McGriff, and he was all about the business. And he said, "Nope, we are not going to be doing orientation. We are doing an emergency search in East Block, Bayside. That was death row." And I knew that because we had all talked about it. I think there was 43 of us, if I recall correctly, that were slated for San Quentin. It might have been more than that. And we came through the main entrance, and that thing there's just like some gates that close for the most part. But then when we came in and across the area there where they have a place called Four Post, and past that and onto East Block, and then you end up inside there, and suddenly it's really real. And you're looking up at 5 tiers, and they're breaking us all up into search teams. And ours, we had to go up and start up on the 5th tier. And you suddenly realize that the reason that this whole search is going on is because they found multiple metal shanks in two different inmates, death row inmates cells. And of course, it was already known that, hey, those things are slated for staff because there's no way they're going to get those out on the yard. And so it was one of those things that suddenly you're affronted with this reality that you are there in close proximity to people who will kill you if the opportunity presents itself. And that's a sobering thought. And that's on day one. And we've thought about this stuff, all the way from the very beginning. But thinking about it is very different from being in proximity to it. And so that's the time when, suddenly, hey, this is really real, and we're really about to do this thing. And all I can say is that it was truly time to start proving your worth, and to start making your presence count for something, even if it was only in your own mind.
Now, the funny thing for me, I worked at a female facility at the beginning of my career, and the facility itself was like a beautiful, like country view. It technically looked like a camp, a college campus, if you will. So it had a lot of, they had a lot of freedom, more so than when I promoted as a sergeant into my next facility. That facility was a maximum security facility. And then when I walked in, that gate did shut close. And the automatic response for me was the separation of both worlds. See, when I was at my first facility, we always had that moment where you could break out of a unit and have that moment of freedom where you could see the beautiful countryside right around you. But in the other facility, you couldn't. You could not leave the building without permission, and you better have a reason. So once you were locked in, you were locked into that building for 8 hours. So once that gate shut, that was reality. So besides the separation of both worlds, it also gave me an alert of hey, whoa, this is real. This is real, because you wouldn't have that bang, you wouldn't have that noise if what we wouldn't have that noise if what on the other side of that gate wasn't dangerous. So to me, that's something that has stayed with me, because even the facility I'm at now, we still have those slamming gates, and I do feel that alert. And by the way, it's a good thing, because it's keeps you on your toes. I actually think the louder the gate, the better, because when you're walking in, that gate should be waking you up, because now you're in a different world, and it's great for that sound to separate the world you came from to the world you're going into. So again, and like Russ said before too, one more thing, from the academy to now entering the real world, this is where everything gets tested. You know, this is the moment where you have to step up and you have to do what you promised to do, what you are trusted to do. And that gate, that first time you hear that slam, that's pushing you into a world that you're never fully ready for, but you are somewhat prepared. And if that makes any sense. So now let's keep it moving. So this is when the job actually begins, because everything before that moment was just rehearsal. The classroom gave you concepts, the instructors gave you commands, but the housing unit, that's where you're given choices. And those choices, not your test scores, are what defines you. So now we go back to another question, Russ. Actually, I want to answer this one first, if you don't mind, Russ. What do you think the shift from rehearsal to reality? Why do you think the shift from rehearsal to reality hit so hard for rookies? I want to mention something real quick, and this is probably going to be a bulk of what we're going to be exploring in the videos to come. It's definitely the bulk of the book, is that I think the academy and how they teach correctional officers has to evolve a little bit. And let me mention why. So when I was in the academy, they want to teach the officers to embrace authority, chase conflict, learn how to use the leverage that's available to you in order to maintain authority. So like, privileges that inmates have that give you a chance to maintain some level of control. And they tell you that, in corrections, this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to manage behavior, and the resources that you have are going to be the privileges. That's why if you ever see me and Russ doing videos in the past, we're very protective of the privileges that people decide to make rights, because once they become rights, we have no more influence. So the privileges matter to us because that's the way we gain control. That's the way we leverage our authority. Now, with that said, when a rookie's coming in on day one, they're you would like to think that they're going to be put into a generalized population where inmates have stuff to lose and the officers can go ahead and enforce their authority by the way that they're being taught, which is basically at the very beginning, follow the rules, chase conflict, don't be afraid to say no. We want to see those write-ups. And again, you can lean on support from your peers, but you got policy and procedure that will help build your confidence. You're going to lean on the rules. And with that said, that's good, but you're in reactionary mode. And that's going to be kind of like the beginning of the book that we talked about. Now, again, not to get too deep, but we will be discussing this more in detail later. There is something that's not being taught in the academy that should be, but it's a bit harder, is when the officers are being taught this reactionary style, and again, where authority is based on leverage, but then you may put them in a unit where the inmates, they don't have anything to lose. So now instead of putting the officers or the rookies in, general housing settings or general population, you put them in extreme close custody settings, and there's a different dynamic there. That dynamic really is where discretion comes in, where it's about the effort of how do you give things back? And that's the gap. That's the gap that we are trying for the life of us to try to give an understanding, because right now the rookies have to manage that gap a lot quicker than they ever did before. So if you got someone in the academy and they're learning that reactionary style, and then on day one, you toss them into a unit where it's about discretion and giving things back, it doesn't work. They wind up being played out by the inmate population. And to be honest with you, now you have the officers or the rookies at a severe disadvantage because they're being tossed into a world where they are the most naive, but the inmates, these are the ones that are the most problematic, but also probably the ones that know the system the best. But Russ, again, for your same question, why do you think the shift from rehearsal to reality hit so hard for the rookies?
I think that's, just due to the fact that, hey, there's no more role playing, there's no more, practice for the way it's maybe going to be. Suddenly, you're in a world where the variables include all of the nasty things that can actually happen instead of the things that, happen to a much lesser degree. when you're, doing some kind of, scenario based training, because, now instead of, getting, someone who's play acting, now you get someone who's not play acting, and the next thing you know, you're busted in the eye, or potentially much, much, much worse than that. And so, yes, it's sobering. And that's the thing is we've laid aside the tools that we used at the academy for preparation, and now the preparation that we're doing is of a wholly different sort. The preparation that we're now doing is we're gaining experience, and the experience includes sweat and blood and fear.
Yeah, and guys, there's a lot more to be discussed here, which will be discussed as we progress through the chapters. But Russ, I got one more question here. What kind of decisions catch new officers off guard the most?
I really think it's really just the little things, at which point do you intercede in an argument with an inmate? How simple can it be where an inmate asks you if he can leave the unit to go do something? What has really prepared you for that? We may have spent significant time talking about what happens during a riot or a scuffle or something like that, but I think it's the smaller things over which we obviously have total discretion, and we just don't know exactly what to do, because those decisions seem so much smaller, yet they have the ability to greatly impact the safety and security, because we don't necessarily know what all of the lesser rules might include. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And guys, I want to mention something in corrections. Nothing lays on the extremes. There's always the middle ground. So you try to balance things out. And I think a big thing for rookies too is when to engage and when not to engage. I think that's a big thing, because sometimes you could see the rookies get confused when they go to engage, but then you can actually see they get a bit nervous and they start to pull back. And it's like, well, when you go to engage, you're engaging. There is no pulling back at that point. And I think that's something that hits you in reality when you get there, because now, yes, you're dealing with the circumstances of, let's say, a disruptive inmate. And maybe when you're, in the academy, it's hands-on immediately. But when you're dealing within the real world, when do you put those hands on? When do you engage, or when do you strategically pull yourself back? And again, it's interesting. And some of the other choices, I think, which we'll discuss later on, would also benefit how you work with others in regards to making sure that you make choices that work for the mission of what that facility or what that agency is trying to accomplish, which means it goes way beyond just what your department is trying to accomplish. So again, this book is about the journey that unfolds after that moment when that gate shuts. It's about what happens when the theory of corrections crashes into the reality of confrontation, manipulation, silence, power, and unpredictability. It's about the rookie officer's progression from strict reaction-based enforcement to calm, stable leadership. And guys, just want to mention, that's why this book had to be written, because if you don't have those senior role models, I don't know who's helping people make it from that reactionary based officer to that person that's more established and has that reputation through good experience. The thing, my biggest concern is when you start losing all these senior role models, you wind up just having officers that never graduate from that reactionary tactic, if you will. They're just not moving past being reactionary. And again, and we know it's a process, and that's what we're going to talk about in the book. And it's a messy, uncertain, very human process. So now, Russ, if I may, why is it important to normalize the messy middle of rookie development?
I think that to me, that's really obvious. Is there's just a necessary step, and it's it's that very first step or second step, maybe at the most, where that's all part of the process. The process is to be able to go in there and start to learn and start to use your mouth and start to use your brain and to experiment with some things and to try and figure out, where this kind of spongy middle ground with regards to discretionary decision making exists. I see people who, in my opinion, they get stuck in the extremes. They can be too fast to press an issue. They can be too slow to press an issue, and that starts to cause them to wander off the reservation, if you will, and to never try and get to that middle ground, that balance where we're using a lot of our words and we're pressing issues verbally, and we're seeking to get things to resolve. And I think, and I know some people probably aren't going to like this, the resolution is what counts. I was always one to believe that, hey, I'm going to push the resolution, and the inmate is ultimately going to get to decide. But when it's time for me to fall off on one side or the other, I'm not going to hesitate, because they are really truly the ones making the choice. Now, they may not like the choice that they chose, but I think that too often we sit there and we make situations worse by being indecisive and by not trying to go with the discretionary decision making route. Discretionary decision making is not refusing to make a choice. It's making a choice and then going with it and following it wherever it may go. And so, for whatever that's worth, I think that, trying to eke out that middle ground, but always falling back to knowing, hey, the inmate is in control of this choice and he may not like it, but once it's made, that's where we're going. I hope that makes sense to everyone out there, because I think that there's something to be said for that, because I've seen people who just can't get to any choice at all, not the soft side, not the hard side, and they just keep running the middle until it becomes dangerous. And I think that that's a really bad position to take up, is to try and push bad tactical placements of wherever you are in any given situation, because all it does is it gives a chance for other inmates to become involved. It makes the inmate think that he's in charge, and it puts things off to a point where instead of pushing from a good position, now we've put ourselves into a really bad light, as it were, when we get to where the rubber finally meets the road.
Yeah, and guys, for me, the messy middle is where it's about development, but it's where the rookie is going to start to develop and make their own choices. So this is where mistakes are going to happen. So I want people to make sure that, and again, we'll be talking about all this later. It's just the introduction, but this is where they may need you the most. And I think a lot of people think that, there's perfection in this process of growth, and there's not. That middle road is where mistakes happen and where you grow, and that's where we have to be invested, which means that we need to lean in and keep that rookie engaged and make sure that they don't embrace one failure as I can't do this job. And I think that's the messy middle. The messy middle is you are working more now with that individual. Not just the position, but the individual. When the rookie comes into this profession, you get all of that person. You don't just get the best of them that makes that position, especially when they're trying to grow into the position. You get all of that individual. So our job at that point is to try to help that individual see their potential and then help them get there. So that, to me, is also, it's going to be time consuming. It's going to be an investment. And I feel that this is something that gets lost. And I think the reason why you also want to normalize this messy middle is because when the rookies come in, and we'll talk about this more later on, they need to know that they're progressing towards something. And believe it or not, they can learn that through failure and success. If you have a rookie and you're trying to teach them the way, and at the end of the day, they don't know where they're going, then a failure will be a failure. It will be something that's task related, and that they're like, whoa, my God, I can't believe I just did that. I messed up. But if you have a path for them, you can maybe take that failure and say, okay, now this is what we learned from it, and this is now what we're going to go ahead and take from that for the next step, where we have to get you to where you need to be. But right now, the rookies that are coming in, there's no path for them, guys. There's not. They're just being handed off to the facility with no direction, no purpose, and sink or swim. They're not being welcomed. And now the human side of this, the connection that we need to have with each other to keep people in this profession, especially the new people, it's being lost. So again, I think it does have to be normalized so people understand that it's their role to help maintain that rookie's engagement, but it's also good for the rookie to know that during that messy middle, there's people there that are going to help them get through it. Now, there's a second part to this too, Russ, that I want to ask you. And basically, have you ever seen a new officer misjudge a situation? And what did that teach you about your own growth?
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that new officer misjudge a situation. It was me, and not just once or twice, but you're very apt to misjudge situations when you're first going in. There is no way to get so far ahead in your knowledge that you can appreciate what is actually going on in any given situation. And so, when we go in and we make a mistake, I'll never forget. I went into one situation where two inmates were arguing, and I mean arguing to the point that it required more than what I was doing. Just telling them, "Hey, knock it off," was not getting through. Well, when you've been in that position one time, the very first time in your life, how do you think that you're going to handle it? All of the training and all of the things that you've done in the academy may or may not give you, that first clue. What do you think it looks like when I've handled that for the 1000th time in my career? It looks markedly different. There is, I have a whole range and depth and breadth of confidence that's built by doing that sort of thing over and over again, and some of them were just knock it off and, hey, they knew who I was, and hey, yeah, that's that's it. Hey, we're doing it, Sarge, or we're doing it, Officer Hamilton. Won't happen again. Or they turn and then both of their ire is on you. And I've been through all of the permutations of this thing, or they decide to escalate it with each other, and hey, then that's cool. I'm just going to, call it on the radio, pepper spray him. If one of them, gets a little bit too much on the other, take his ankle out with a good baton strike. Cool. And you get to the point where all of these, different permutations, all of these different variations, all of these different choices that you get to make, you're just selecting at that point then, because you know which one comes next. When you initially start that process, when you're there on day one, though, it doesn't come at you like that, because you're trying to remember everything that's in the academy, and nothing is necessarily coming through at the right speed, and it's going to take a while for you to adjust, adapt, and overcome second by second by second. And so, yes, I have seen that officer, and he is me.
I know for me, it's me too, but I definitely see it more now, looking back after 22 years, looking at the rookies now. When I see someone misjudge something, especially if they act too quick, it's because they jump on things without context or without patterns. They don't know how to put things into a full picture yet because they're new. And that's kind of what we're going to wind up also discussing as we progress, is that, when you're new, you may see things as only isolated, where as you get more experience, you start to connect the pieces of the puzzle and you're able to see context. Context truly does come with experience. And I think that's why me, Russ, and Joe also have these dialogues that we've had on our channel and Tier Talking within the books, because the dialogues provide context. We're trying to give you context to our experience. So when you look at a situation, you kind of see the situation maybe evolve in your head as to the different ways it can go based on the patterns that are developing, because there are times where you can jump in too quick and really misread the situation and cause yourself to get harmed or cause others to get harmed. Or there could be times where there is a pattern, but all you see are isolated events, and then you don't jump in at all. So I think that truly does come with experience. So for me at the very beginning and now looking back, I think it's when I see someone misjudge something, I usually ask, why did you go in, or why did you not do this? And then usually the person will give me an answer. And then it's like, well, that really, maybe makes sense with your intent, but there's a bigger why here. And unfortunately, you didn't see that why. You didn't see the pattern. Or when Russ did videos for us in the past, Russ will tell you, when you're watching somebody, you're going to watch how they move and how they interact, but it's still a collection of patterns, not by themselves, not isolated, but a collection of patterns that provide a context that actually gives you more fuel to go ahead and commit to whatever has to be done. Because I want to mention one more thing, guys. We are going to discuss this in detail. When we choose to engage or not engage, there's always going to be a consequence. And when you have isolated information, the consequence for your actions on you may weigh greatly. So you may decide not to act or to act, whatever the choice is. But when you have context and when you have a better understanding of the situation, there's fuel in your justification. So that pushes you forward, or that could push you back, whatever the case may be. But you're able to justify your reasoning because you understand the bigger picture. Now, so why this book matters, but in this case here, why this video or the series of videos matter is because if you're in correction, these books or this book or these videos will give voice to what you're experiencing and explain why you're not failing, you're forming. It will give structure to the stress you feel and show you that what you feel, overwhelming everything, is now actually shaping the officer you're becoming. So, Russ, why do rookies often mistake pressure for failure?
I think that's simply a function of what we're used to in daily life that does not involve, walking in behind those prison doors. When you feel pressure at work, you have a deadline, and maybe your boss is after you a little bit, and we start to think of that as hey, I'm not doing my job, or I'm not doing my job correctly, or I'm not doing my job correctly according to him or her or the other guy. In corrections, pressure is going to be the norm. And so pressure should just start putting you into that sorting process. And I just describe it this way: is the person that I became was radically different from the person that I was. Because now, hey, once I start the sorting process and I'm getting to my solution, if it takes me, if the solution needs to be there in a quarter of a second, I'm going to have it. If I'm lucky enough to have some time, a minute or two, I'm still going to get there. I'll never forget one particular situation I was responding to, and there's a couple rookies there, and they were not meaning to dilly-dally. But they just didn't have their sorting process together like I did. And that's not a reflection on them. It's not a reflection on me. But I got there, and while they were still giving commands, man, I just started getting busy with some good old fashioned OC spray and some direction to hit the ground, or I was going to hit you with my baton. And then it was just over. And so there's a different level of competency that comes with being able to do that, and being able to I think it was Wyatt Earp that said, gunfighting is all about being able to take your time in a hurry. And that's what happens to people who become correctionally competent. They get really good at taking their time in a hurry. And there is a difference that you start to feel, and a difference that you start to understand about the way you think about things, the way you act and react to things, and about the way you sort things out, quickly, efficiently, and without having to, get to the point where you're worried about, pulling the trigger on that canister of OC or executing a baton strike. It just becomes where it's just part of the nature of what's going on. And you stop overthinking it, you stop overanalyzing it, and it just becomes what correctional law enforcement is.
Yeah, and I want to say, when it says why do rookies often mistake pressure for failure? So, guys, I love what Russ said. Corrections has tons of pressure. It's just an environment that's full of stress, tension, anxiety. But the last thing you also want to do is, through your own security, add pressure. We have to be very wary of what we put out there as well about ourselves. Some rookies want to be perfect. You can't be perfect in corrections. And now you put the pressure of being perfect. You put the pressure of outcomes that are out of your hands to control. And now, right now, your want to be perfect will now add to you being hesitant and not ready to act. I don't think anybody in corrections in their right mind is looking for anyone to be perfect. I'm not looking for a senior officer to be perfect, let alone a rookie on day one. So sometimes the pressure doesn't just come from the environment, but it comes on how we internalize and how we filter, how we view ourselves, how we view our failures, how we view our mistakes. So in the end, I just want to make sure that rookies understand that no one's going to be perfect. You strive to be perfect, but you're never going to be perfect. And at the end of the day, we want people to lean in, and we want to pay, people to make decisions, commit to effort. But if you're looking at it from outcome supersedes effort, you don't have control of that. You only have control of the effort that you produce. So I think for a lot of rookies, they often mistake pressure for failure because they have their own insecurities, and they wind up elevating what they feel they should be to be effective. And then they wind up becoming more hesitant because they're trying to be perfect in a world that they feel demands it, because maybe we do paint that picture, but we know people in this profession are far from perfect. You're dealing with human behavior. And then another thing, if you're watching it and you're not a rookie, but you're a senior officer or you're a supervisor, whatever it is, you also have to make sure that you understand that with a rookie, that you understand that they're going through a lot of insecurity. For them, if there's silence, they're going to filter it in so many different ways. So they need you to keep them motivated. You have to be very active with them, very engaged with them, because the moment you're not, the moment that there's these gaps, they're going to fill it with their own insecurities. I know that to be true because I've did that. Now, Russ, there's one more question here I want to ask you. And right here, it's what's something you wish someone had told you your first year in?
Gosh, man, that's a really good one. I would say, I think that, just if someone had said, "Hey, just go with what your initial first instinct is, but think it through if time allows." Those first few incidents are, really uncomfortable because you're like looking around and, you carry all the authority. You got the badge there on your chest. And, many times, you're there at least temporarily by yourself. And so, you've got to really learn to inhabit and to take on the full mantle of what your authority is. I had a friend of mine, he actually, sat down and read to me, what the penal code has to say about our authority, in California. And I mean, it's pretty awesome. It's there's a lot of authority there. And yeah, you have to act within, law, state law, policy, procedure, case law, all of those things. But if you're willing to, truly inhabit the full mantle of that, and understand, where the lines are, and, you're respective of those things, and you're serious about your oath, that alone can take you a long way. So I would say that, that's something that someone actually did with me at one point, was going over what our full authority was and how we can exercise that. And it didn't really matter necessarily what what some specific supervisors might have thought of that, because the penal code told me so, as it were.
I think for me, it's more about, I wish people told me to embrace conflict a little bit more, get used to it a little bit more. Conflict doesn't mean you're going in the wrong direction. Conflict means that you're probably heading in the right direction, but you're dealing with expected resistance. And also, when I came into corrections, you couldn't fail. You couldn't make a mistake. It was like that military thing where if you messed up, you're going to lose your job. And so we all had the fear of making a mistake, no matter how small or how big. To us, it was the same consequences. And what that kind of taught us, to be honest with you, is it put us into survival mode where we wouldn't want to report a mistake. We would rather hide it because we were afraid that we would lose our job. The consequences were too great. So I wish, the leadership back then for me would have said, hey, we know mistakes are going to happen. We'll make sure that if you do make a mistake, it can be reversed. We'll never let you fall so deep where it can't be, where it becomes irreversible. But go out there, because I think for me, what stopped a little bit of my growth at the very beginning was I was very concerned about making moves, making decisions, because if anything went backwards, I would be in trouble for it. So I like to tell people now, we're looking for innovation. We're looking for people to grow, for people to make decisions, to lean into that. So you can't be a hypocrite. You can't tell somebody, hey, we want you to be a decision maker when you come to the department. And the moment they make a decision, you stamp a scarlet letter on them and throw them out of the profession. So I would like to say, going back, I wish someone would have told me, go be the best you can be. And if you make mistakes, we'll work through it. And then let me get the next part. So if you're a field training officer, supervisor, sergeant, or senior staff, this book, these videos will give you something just as important, insight into the stage of growth your rookies are navigating. And more importantly, how you can support them at each step without crushing their confidence or stalling their development. And that's why I said it's good for anybody to watch this video. It's good for rookies so they can kind of understand what they're going through and know that they're not alone, that we've all been through it. But it's also good for the people that are watching it to show where they need to step up and balance, because this is not growth in isolation. This is growth in partnership. So, Russ, what are some of the common mistakes seasoned staff make when mentoring rookies?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, but I would say that maybe it's on two sides of the equation. Letting them go too far with a situation, or not letting them go far enough. But if I were really going to peel back and talk about maybe my my own experiences, is their whole idea about, and we've discussed this so many times, Anthony, is the whole the sink or swim model. Why does it have to be sink or swim? Why can't we give the rookies floaties for a little bit, and help them out and show them a few things and guide them and model some behavior, some of the ways that we act toward inmates, some of the commands that we give, some of the ways that we sort things out, and let them, pick and choose a little bit what works for them. And so that's what I would say is that there's too often I see seasoned staff who are not necessarily effective or competent, but they just have seasoning, and the only seasoning that they have is salt, and the only thing that salt does is it disturbs and infects the wounds that it's rubbed in. And so those are not people who are true professionals. They're just people with seasoning. And so that's what I would go with.
Yeah, I always say mentoring is a two-way relationship. So you have to also understand the person that you're mentoring. So I know we may always tell rookies, when you come in, you got to shut up, you got to listen. Yeah, I think that's a context there. But the person mentoring has to accept feedback. They have to kind of know who you are talking to, because you want the lessons to hit that person as an individual and not just as a position, because you want them to relate to the lessons that are being taught. So I think it's a great developed relationship between two individuals who appreciate and value each other. And the other thing I like to add, because Russ touched on the sink or swim, the other thing I would like to add is that mentoring it's truly a gift that you are given to that individual, and it's a gift that you're giving to the agency. And don't just do it because you're assigned it. Because if you're just assigned it and you really don't value the job, or at least in a way that can be translated to the person that you need to teach, then step away from it. It's okay. I get it. Sometimes we go through these bad moments in the career. Maybe I'm just not the one because I don't believe enough in this profession to sell it to a rookie who needs to carry on that belief for the next 25 years. So I may have the lessons to teach them, but I'm just not that connected to the profession to really go into the why and the value and all this other stuff. Plus, I'm too close on the way out right now, and I'm just not feeling this profession. So if I was going to be their mentor, I'd be more like a coach, just telling them what to do without giving them anything of value, where the mentor has to give value, has to translate buy-in. So you have to know if you're able to do it or not, because in the end, this is not just about you spitting off advice. It's about you engaging with that individual and making sure that they find a place in this profession that they love and connect with. And if you are too disgruntled to do that, then you should not be next to anybody that is coming into this profession at the very beginning training, because that first impression is what they're going to remember. And then, Russ, I have this one too. How can veteran staff walk the line between correcting and encouraging?
I think that's if you learn anything as a correctional professional, it's being able to understand what people need at that moment in time and how to convey it to them in the proper type of communication that makes them want to accept it. If you can't do that, you probably haven't been learning a whole lot. And that's what I have tried to, sometimes successfully, sometimes maybe not so successfully. I've tried to do, with the people that were looking to me for leadership or knowledge or whatever it was, is being able to, bridge that gap, use my words, model things that I thought that they could model as well, based on, what their attributes were, and then be able to, have them be able to have some success with that. And so that's the kind of thing that, I've always looked to pass on. And I think that, other people should do that from an intentional standpoint, where they are, specifically focused on trying to help people in a method and in a way that actually does help them.
Yeah, and I was, like Russ said, it's about building the person up, which is different for each individual. So, one person you can be this way, another person you may have to be another way. So it really is about knowing who that individual is, because at the end of the day, you are mentoring a person, and every person's different. And I know it sounds crazy, but you're dealing with the whole person. So you really have to have a moment where you talk to the individual, see what they're about, see what they want from the profession, and try to mentor them in a way where they find value, because you're talking from their perspective and not just your own. And I think that's key. I think that's extremely, extremely important, because people grow differently. People want different things, so if you don't know what that is, then you're again just coaching. You're not connecting them to anything in the long term. Now, keep it going. So too often in corrections, we manage ambiguity by pretending it doesn't exist. We act like the rules answer every question, when in truth, discretion is often where real leadership lives. So this book, these videos, is here to name that gray area, to shine a light on what happens between follow policy and you got this. And now, Russ, the question here now is, what is the gray area, or why is the gray area so hard to talk about, and why is it where the most important growth happens?
So somewhere between policy and the gray area and the other side of the gray area, the black area, if you will, you know, is that area that we are not supposed to touch under any circumstances, and rightfully so. However, there are times where the solution, or at least the complete solution, is not defined by what policy states. It's not defined by what law states. It's not defined by what case law states. And so we're left with some things that we may be personally uncertain about. There may be people with less uncertainty about it, and there may be some people who have more certainty about it that are going to take opportunities to try and knock you down, you know, if you're coloring outside the lines, even if it's only a little bit. I got to a point in my career where I was comfortable enough to do the things that I thought were necessary while still believing that I was true to my oath. But there's a lot of people out there who, when they are sitting on a sea of ambiguity, are not comfortable enough to start making decisions and to start, actually acting and taking action in ways that are going to be, what's the word that I'm looking for? In ways that are going to, be patently good for everybody. And so sometimes, you have to have the courage to be able to, to ride that line and to understand that, where the borders are maybe better than someone else, and you're more comfortable with it. And I think that that's where true leadership lies. And I don't think, and I'm not telling anyone out there to not follow policy, but I'm saying that there is some extra judicial policy out there that does count for something and may not always be apparent. And sometimes you just have to be the one that makes the decision that puts things back right, and maybe saves a life, maybe saves your whole institution. So, and I think that those gray areas are things we can't always describe. We only know them once they come to fruition, because I'm hard pressed to come up with a clear defining example. Because if I could come up with a clear and defining example, we wouldn't be having this conversation, would we? Does that make sense at all?
Yes, like guys, when this book that I wrote, the videos, there's 8 chapters, but 5 of them, the main 5, are going to be structured around growing from reactionary to established. And at that point, there is going to be a shift in where you're comfortable in making decisions in the gray. Now, granted, there are some people that slowly develop and build confidence in making decisions in the gray, and then there are some that will actually have that immediate moment where there is no defined answer, and they are going to have to make a decision, and and be responsible for that outcome. And obviously, we want people to make decisions to at least slow things down. I think the reason why a lot of people feel uncomfortable about talking about the gray is because most of the people that teach may never have done the job or the way the job is done now. So therefore, the gray is ambiguous to them because they're used to teaching policy. They're used to teaching definitive yeses and definitive nos, and then you're in class and you're giving them a little bit more details, and now the nos and the yeses become maybes, and and of course they don't want to hear that, because nope, it's this and it's this, and they're so defined by policy, they're so rigid by policy that at the end of the day is I didn't even need you to teach me that, because I could just go home and read that. What I wanted in this class is the nuance, the outliers, the decision making that does happen in the gray. So I think a lot of times it's uncomfortable because the people that are the ones that are supposed to coach you through it have to know enough about the job to be able to coach you through it. The gray is what is experience driven. You don't learn the gray from reading policy. That's experience driven. So with that said, as a rookie, you're going to go through it. Everybody that works in corrections is going to have to manage a lot of the decisions that they make through the gray. But the point is, there are some that will learn their way, like we're going to go through the book, or there'll be some that will have that one moment, and it has to happen. But again, policy will always be your guideline. It'll be the North Star. It's going to be what I need to bring something back to. But it's how you got to manage that to get to that is where the gray usually lives. Now, I got the next part, Russ. Let me open it up again. So again, the book, the videos that we're doing right now, the book that we're reading it from. So this is a leadership tool. It's a cultural guide. And in a very real way, it's a retention strategy, because what I'm trying to do by creating this is to give people a pathway so they don't feel so lost, they don't give up so quickly, and they understand that there's a process here. And hopefully when they go through the moments, they're able to relate that to a process in their better development. Now, because rookies don't quit because they're weak, they quit because no one ever showed them what growth actually looks like. And that's what we're going to show throughout these videos and through this book. They quit because the pressure they feel isn't matched by a path forward. And that's why me and Russ, that's why we do the discussions. Going back to the gray, me and Russ, Joe, Tier Talk, we're always talking in the gray. So now, Russ, next question here is, in your experience, what drives good officers out early, and what could have helped keep them here?
So, there are a lot of, forces within corrections, that cause people to just think, hey, is this going to be, it for the long run? How many years do I have to invest before I get a piece of the weekend? How many years do I have to invest, before I see second watch? How much time do I have to spend doing what some people consider to be, crap assignments, versus, getting a shot at, kicking your heels back for, 8 hours in a tower or whatever. Different things, have different value resonances with different people. And so I think that, just those things alone are so important to most people, that some of them, just can't get over what that initial investment is going to have to look like. I think I got my first piece of the weekend at 10 or 11, 12 years, something like that. Some people are really put off by that. Some people, it's just the day in, day out, high pressure grind that comes with doing the things that you have to do in corrections. So, so I think that things that could have helped them along, are seeing what the other opportunities are that they might be missing out on. Corrections is one of those things where, you can have a lot of fun and interesting side gigs. There's people out there, hey, they're going to be a part of the honor guard, or they're going to, get a temporary, bump up to do investigations, or they're going to be, part of the CERT team, and they're going to have a chance to do different things. Maybe they're going to do some, some training and development kind of thing. They're going to do the counselor thing for a little while, or they're going to, really push for doing the jobs that are going to give them the opportunity to promote upward. And so it's a very individualized thing. And so people shouldn't ever feel in corrections, that they're stuck where they're at, because that is rarely at all actually the case. So I think that people that only focus on the small things, like I mentioned before, they get stuck in that rut where they're only thinking about the small things and not about the big picture. And I think that that's a detriment to them.
Yeah, I also think, when it comes to that, you also have new people that they want to rush through to the next milestone when this is a profession that needs experience. You don't just get promoted after the first day. You have to go through your trials and errors, build experience. And I think that's where we could do a little bit more, because we should build something that progresses them towards something like mini milestones before they're eligible to make that next lateral or make that next promotion. Also, I would like to also add just, the support. They need to be supported coming in, because this is a profession that you don't want anybody to walk alone, especially with today's day and age. So you got to show them support. If the academy is bring them in right now with holding their hand, unfortunately, that is what it is. That's what we're getting. Then maybe at some level we have to continue to do so until we can push them out on their own. Because remember, look at that contrast. If the academy is being softer to try to get them in an effort to build them, because they're going to still try to build them, when they pass them off to the facility has to continue that momentum in an effort to fully build the individual. So all I may be getting from the academy is somebody that's 1% in the right direction. Okay, but they're in the right direction. We'll pick up the other 99%. But again, it's not the academy could have done more. It's like, no, what are we doing in partnership? And then the other thing is that initial impression of the profession. Who are you introducing that person to when they get to that facility? Who is representing their career at some point? All right, now how these videos will be structured, or how the book is structured. So the journey, so the book is a path, right? Or the videos are going to be a path. So the journey from reaction to reputation isn't a simple checklist. It's a layered, progressive transformation. That's what we're going to go over in these whole series of videos. And the book or the videos are going to reflect that. It's broken into 5 key phases. Now, remember, guys, there's going to be 10 videos. So this book actually has 10 chapters, an intro, a closing, and 8 chapters in the middle. But the 5 chapters are the growth of the officer. So the first is the reactionary stage. So that's where officers enforce every rule out of necessity, insecurity, and survival. That we talked about that, and we're definitely going to be diving into that as we explore more into the first few videos. Then you have the shifting point. That's where they begin questioning their own reflexes and seeking a better way, and we're going to explain that. Then you got building presence, and that's when the rookies stop chasing control and start owning space through consistency and calm. We'll get to that. Then you have the spectrum of growth. So that's where we break down the 5 distinct stages rookies pass through from green to grounded, which really starts off in observation. And then the last part of this growth will be the arrival of discretion. Look at the whole road we have to travel to get to the arrival of discretion. This is the stuff that you watch people do in real time. But if I don't have that person in real time, what am I looking for? And that's why me and Russ are working on putting out these videos. So the arrival of discretion is where leadership lives, not in punishment, but in purpose. Now, let me go down here. So each section includes real insight from the field, psychological framing, and actionable takeaways that both rookies and veteran staff can use to improve their presence, sharpen their leadership, and foster a culture that develops and not destroys new talent. So, Russ, out of the 5 stages I just read to you, reactionary stage, the shifting point, building a presence, the spectrum of growth, and the arrival of discretion, which of these 5 stages do you see most rookies get stuck in, and why?
What was number 2 again?
Number 2 is going to be the shifting point. So that's where the rookies begin questioning their own reflexes and seeking a better way. So they're not just chasing the charge anymore, chasing the conflict. They're trying to, if I may, real quick, and we'll go into this a little bit more detailed as we go through the videos. You can't survive a career in reactionary mode. So you're meant to start there to create a template, but you can't remain there because you're going to burn yourself out. So eventually what happens is rookies start to get tired being reactionary. They do. They start to get tired of writing every rule because they see the senior officers are around them and they're able to move things correctly with 2 words. And here's the rookie fucking pulling their hair out. So eventually what's going to wind up happening is the rookie's going to look around them and say, listen, why am I doing all this when there's other ways? So instead of their reaction, their reflex is going towards that charge, it becomes more about better ways where it pulls them away from being burned out.
Yeah, so I think that's where a lot of them, get hemmed up, is because they want to be doing the shifting, but they think that they're ready for discretionary decision making, but they're not, because it's easy to make mistakes when you don't have a really well padded resume of experience that you've done. And so I think that, there's a certain amount of danger there, because they just want to go ahead and they want to forget about the little things. Now, me, especially, as I got more into my career, my kind of my mantra day by day is I'm not going to look at it unless it's a felony. But the difference with me is I knew how to find felonies, and I worked them all the time. Where a lot of times with the rookies, they don't have any idea about what they're seeing, and so they're shifting back and forth, and they can be very directionless. They don't understand. They don't understand how far they can develop, and they often think that they are at the pinnacle of where they should be, when they're only on step 2 out of 10 or something like that. And so it's easy when you think you're at the pinnacle to rest there and to just shift around and say, oh, I'm at the pinnacle of what I'm doing now. I'm doing discretionary decision making. And you're just kind of looking at them and going, what? That you think that this is the pinnacle? What have you done recently that proves that, And so, is that a good answer?
No, Russ, it is, because I want to mention something, guys. So as you develop from reactionary all the way to that discretion, that reputation, whatever it is, where basically you have those established expectations, that doesn't mean that you may never have to go back to reactionary again. I mean, there could be certain inmates that can pull you back into that. It really is dependent on who you're also dealing with. But for the most part, when you have a reputation, it affects more people. So hopefully most of the time you're able to be in that reputation, that established expectations. But I've seen senior officers quickly go to that reactionary mode too. It's just they're not doing it all the time. And that to me is what's key. Now, for me, I'm going to say, which of these 5 stages do you see most rookies get stuck in and why? So I don't want to say discretion at the end, because obviously you're looking and say, well, that's the hardest. So obviously, that's probably going to be the most difficult. You've got to realize something. As they're progressing, they're building fuel, they're building momentum. So the stages actually get easier once they take that first step. So I got to go with, I think Russ was saying it too, when they go from the reactionary stage to the shifting point, that's where I think most will get stuck in. I think so, because that's where it takes the most courage to jump and now not just be controlled by the situation, but rather, how do I lean into it? How do I now put some control back into the universe? So if you don't make that first jump, you're never going to be able to cross into that final stage of that discretion, the arrival of discretion. So I would go ahead and say it's that first jump. And then the second part of that question, Russ, is how can leaders help their officers move from one stage to the next without rushing the process?
So, that's just a matter really of, truly, moving them through the stages by putting them into positions where they have to progress. I've often said that, the real way for a person to progress is someone who's willing to put themselves into uncomfortable positions in order to find their way out. Not everybody is willing to do that. Sometimes you have to do that for them. I'm a big if there's a rookie out there now that really wants to know, the easiest way for me to put this is be out there and always have your hand up. If you go out there and you always have your hand up and you're always willing to do something for your sergeant or lieutenant, you're going to get yourself into positions that are difficult, perhaps even dangerous. They're certainly going to be uncomfortable. But you, by doing that, are going to be able to gain so much more knowledge through exposure to experience than you will ever do by sitting in IST and watching some kind of, death by PowerPoint presentation.
And that's what we don't do. Now, guys, we're going to come to the last section, so we're almost wrapping up. But I want to answer this question too: how can leadership help the officers move from one stage to the next? So, guys, I wrote one of my books before, from reactionary to established. We kind of broke it down different steps. I'm trying to simplify the process again to keep it moving forward. But I think we finally have to name the process. We all went through this. We just never named it before. So I think for the senior officers or the supervisors that are watching this, this is the process. We figured it out. Right here on this show, right here in the books, we figured it out. This is the process all officers are going to go through. They're going to go through some reactionary phase that they're taught to in the profession, and then they're taught in the academy, and then they're going to go ahead and graduate to this. And I will say this, though, and we're definitely going to discuss this later, just food for thought. This reactionary stage that the rookies start off in, this doesn't fit well in those close custody units. They're not meant for that. And that's why we need to speed up this. Because if we don't speed it up, we have officers right now going in close custody units still at that reactionary stage. And that reactionary stage is really putting a lot of control into those inmates, because those are the inmates that don't have nothing to lose. So again, you name it, these are the steps. Now, how do we progress the rookie towards establishing that reputation? So now last section here is, what is this book or series going to ask of you? And so this book or series doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be aware that the officer standing stiff in the corner, sweating every minor infraction, is not weak. They're in stage one. Aware that the staff member you see pausing, reflecting, or given a privilege back early may not be going soft. They may be mastering the art of discretion. So here's a question, Russ. Why is it so important that we stop labeling people as weak or soft when they're actually growing?
So I think that there is a natural position inside of corrections to do that very thing. I think that the reason for it is because there is a lot of that out there. There are a lot of times where, you see supervisors who may not necessarily have your back. You see, the politicians on TV, who are going to make sure that, that they, are passing the newest, latest, greatest 52 strikes law. And so there is a natural reaction toward anything that isn't necessarily at the maximum end of the spectrum, to identify as weak or less than effective because of those factors. That's not necessarily the case. It's easy to paint with broad strokes. I think that, the question should be asked, is this person truly being weak, or are they exercising discretion? And what should we do to help them? Because the answer may be to, absolutely tell them, hey, tune it up, tighten it up, get a little bit harder. But that's the knee-jerk reaction. I think that if we're going to truly assess it, hey, let's see what's really going on. Let's identify if this person is actually, acting with good discretion. You should be able to, as you're getting to that point where discretion is more important, you ought to be able to identify what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, and be able to articulate all of those things about it. If it's just some kind of vague feeling, you probably don't have a really good handle on it.
Yeah, well said. And I will say, like for here, again, now that we've established these labels, we named the process. This will actually help us identify what they could be going through, because maybe the effort to give something back is something that they saw another senior officer do. So again, this is something that we're going to discuss as the videos progress, but this is the growth. So now we've identified a process that the rookie knows what they're going through, but we also know what we are looking at. So hopefully this gives us a bit of a blueprint of how to address it. And the last question I got, Russ, is what message do you want before we go over that, let me read this one last part. So if you're the rookie just starting out, the book or videos asks you to lean into the discomfort, into the awkwardness, into the doubt, because what you're going through right now is not permanent, but it is essential. And if you stick with it, if you learn, if you reflect, if you grow, you won't just survive corrections, you'll shape it. So Russ, the final question I have for you today to end this video is, what message do you want every rookie to hear when they're deep in that doubt?
I think I could possibly, answer that with a single word, and that word would be through. And by through, I mean to go all the way through, to get to the other side, to not let anything get in your way. I think that, those moments of doubt, those moments of uncertainty, often, action of any type is better than hesitation of all types. So with that one word, through, I believe that, that is the one thing that you can take with you, and that, in that moment of doubt, hey, let's get through this. Let's get all the way through. Let's get to the other side. And, let's place all of our doubts aside and do what needs to be done.
Right. And I want to say, for me, the one thing I would say is the one thing that this profession will test is your ability to be consistent in doing what's correct. So you have to make sure that if you know what you're doing is correct, be prepared to be challenged, but be prepared to reinforce and remain consistent, because ultimately respect from everyone will be drawn from your ability to be consistent in what matters most. Okay, so guys, so before we wrap up this video, the next part will be part, it'll be second video, but technically it is part one. It's called the reactionary stage. So it's sweating the rules. And the tagline for this will be, the rookie steps into the fire, not to avoid it, but to prove they can stand it. But early footing is fragile. And so they grip the rules like a lifeline. And we have a lot to discuss in that chapter. That is the reactionary stage. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing for the first video?
Yeah, guys, we are here. I don't think that you should, view this particular set of videos as being just for rookies, though. I think that, we should have some, honesty with ourselves as to, how far we've personally developed, or how far we could have personally developed within the system that we work in. Sometimes the systems that we work in, can be, corrupt. They can be inefficient. They can be, non-professional. They can be doing stuff that are, that is just really antithetical towards, good correctional evidence-based practices. So don't assume that you have nothing to learn just because you're not technically a rookie anymore. Come along, join us, see what you know, or see what you don't know.
Well, again, this is a partnership effort. We don't grow people in isolation. So this is for the rookie to understand the process, but also for the senior officers. They've been through it. How do you support the person through the process? So again, first video is wrapped up. We'll see you shortly with the second video. As always, guys, this is reactionary to reputation. And right now we're modeling our lessons with this book right here, which is available right now, all 10 chapters. It's all there right now on Amazon ebook, and it will be soft covered published. But once it comes out, it's going to be merged with this book, Surviving Without a Mentor, 100 Deep Cut Tips for Rookie Correctional Staff. It'll be put all into one complete book and then handed out into the world of corrections. As always, guys, stay safe. So